All righty. Welcome to the Questionable Calls podcast. It is Wednesday evening, about 8 p.m. Eastern time. Lot to digest. We got the Michigan is your national champion for college football. First time in 26 years. And we got our wild card games coming up this weekend in the NFL. And massive coaching changes, Clark. We have, I think, 7 openings in the NFL now, and that's not including whatever's going to happen with Bill Belichick, which we don't know yet. So lot to digest. So let's break it down. So Michigan wins the national championship. Clark, that was a game that it's one of those you keep looking at the score and you're expecting Michigan to be up by 30, and because they really the game vacillated, and I heard this description I thought was appropriate. It vacillated between Michigan's blowing them out and if Washington makes a play here, the game's tied. It was one of those things where you thought early, okay, Michigan's probably got this, and then they kind of, Michigan kind of did what they did in the, similar to the Alabama game where Michigan kind of, couldn't do anything on offense for a while, let Washington kind of get back into it, but then when it came time to finish it, Michigan just squeezed the life out of them. So, I thought it was a great performance by Michigan. Of course, we all wanted a closer game, but it's one of those things. Michigan was just a better team. There's not much you can do about it.
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping for a better game. I mean, it ended up being kind of competitive for a little while, but Washington just couldn't. They just couldn't get anything going in the second half. So yeah, Michigan, you had said something to me the other day, Michigan's not the kind of team that really blows out, good teams. I mean, they blew out some teams in the Big Ten, but that's the Big Ten. That's kind of different than Washington. I mean, they were in the Pac-12, and the Pac-12 was a pretty good conference this year. So, I was, like I said, I was disappointed we didn't get a better game. But, look, Michigan, I think they're the best team in the country. Not just because they won the games, but I mean, it looks like, you compare them to the other teams. I mean, granted, they didn't get to play Georgia, but, I mean, they seem like the best team to me. And obviously, we questioned it all year long, really, just because they played in the Big Ten. I needed to see it against some other teams. And also, we had seen them go into the playoff the 2 years before and lose. So, and, I mean, they almost lost to Alabama. But, I think they were the best team this year. Maybe it's not by a ton, but I think it's pretty safe to say they were the best team. Just running the ball. After watching Michigan a little, toward the end of the season, I do find it kind of funny, all these people trying to tell me J.J. McCarthy is awesome. I'm not saying he's terrible or anything, but come on, guys. I mean, he's fine. He makes a few plays here and there, but a lot of these games, they're just running the ball. It feels like they're hiding him a little bit. I mean, because they don't want to get into a game where he has to throw the ball a bunch for them to win the game. They clearly didn't want to do that, which that's not their strength.
Yeah, I mean, and I would say, and when people complain about J.J. McCarthy, my response is, well, Stetson Bennett won the last 2 national championships, so I don't think you need you don't need to have a great quarterback, and I think we gotten spoiled over the last 4 or 5 years with all the great quarterbacks in college football. That that's how you have to win. And this Michigan team was like an Alabama team from 10 to 12 years ago, where the quarterback's not really the guy, and they just crush you. And that's exactly what Michigan did in this game. They just absolutely crushed them on both sides of the ball, which, we weren't sure that Michigan was going to be able to do that the last 2 years because they didn't do that. So this is a great job. And I think this was one of those where this was coming. This was Michigan for the last 3 years working their way up to this point where they just continued to get better the last couple of years until they finally, got the team that, that they needed to win the whole thing. And so I give Michigan massive credit. I thought the whole season, Michigan was really good. I didn't have a lot of evidence to help that argument, but Michigan took care of it. The way they played against Alabama, and even if Michigan had lost this game, they've done all they need. They've proven all they need to prove to me. Like this is Harbaugh at his best. He turns these teams into physical monsters, and he did it at Stanford. He did it in the NFL. This is what he does, and this is a perfect team for Harbaugh. And I think JJ McCarthy's a perfect quarterback for Jim Harbaugh.
Right. Yeah. I did think it was after the game. So Harbaugh said, someone asked about the different things that have obviously gone on this year in terms of Harbaugh being suspended for 6 games over the course of the year for various reasons. And he said basically, if you take it out of context, it sounds a certain way, but I think he was basically saying the players are innocent, which is true. The players are innocent. Like, if you want to criticize the coaching staff for letting whatever happen, okay, fine. Or you want to criticize the University of Michigan, like, that's perfectly fine. But, the players are innocent. And yeah, the players are innocent. I don't have a problem with the players. These different things that happened are, the recruiting stuff that stuff just bores me because it's basically the NCAA trying to cling to this old definition of amateurism, which really doesn't hold up anymore. So even though that stuff is technically against the rules, I don't. And now you've got NIL, so I don't really see that as that big of a deal. The other stuff, the sign stealing stuff. I mean, look, people are going to forget about that, and the NCAA is going to take a while to finish their investigation, and then we can talk about it then. And look, there's some people that'll view this title, like probably Ohio State and some other Big Ten teams will probably view this title as illegitimate for some reason. I don't necessarily think that it is. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I've pointed out that, that this happened and this sounds like it happened and it was cheating. But as far as it, tainting the title, like thinking they got it undeservedly, like, no, I don't really see it that way. But again, we'll talk about this, I'm sure, in a year or two whenever the NCAA finally finishes their investigation. Because it usually takes them a while.
I want to make this point about Harbaugh. I want to make the first about the NCAA stuff. First of all, this is not disaster scenario stuff. This is not rampant cheating and players getting money they shouldn't have gotten. And if you go back the last 20 years of NCAA scandals, this is pretty minor compared to the rest of them, number one. Number two, this doesn't change. Like, Michigan didn't win all these games because of cheating. Like, whatever advantage you think they got, I'm sorry, this is kind of like Tom Brady deflating footballs. The advantage they got is minimal, and Michigan proved it by winning the national championship after everybody thought they were cheating. So the third thing about the NCAA is about these allegations, and this ties into what I want to talk about with Harbaugh, is it's going to take forever. Like, they just got the notice of allegations about the recruiting thing, which Michigan self-imposed a 3-game suspension at the beginning of the season, right? So I don't even think any of this NCAA stuff is going to affect Michigan next season at all. I don't think the NCAA is going to make any decisions before next season starts. I think there's pretty much zero chance of that. So the idea that Harbaugh's leaving because, I don't want to deal with the NCAA, I think it's complete nonsense. I think Harbaugh's wanted to coach in the NFL the whole time. He flirts with the NFL every single offseason. He's talking to teams. He was talking to teams last year. He was talking to teams the year before that. If he's going to be at Michigan, he's going to be talking to NFL teams. I think if Harbaugh gets the right job, I think he will take it. I don't think that has anything to do with what's going on at Michigan. It's just a personal thing with him that he wants to succeed at the highest level. And guys that are driven uniquely like Harbaugh, that's what they want to do. So I think I told you last night, I think it's about 75% he goes to the NFL, 25% he stays. Yes, I do think there's a decent chance that he stays. If the NFL teams don't offer him the right gig or the right amount of power, or he doesn't get what he wants, he's not going to go. Because he could have taken these jobs the past 3 years and he didn't. Because he's waiting for the right opportunity for him. And when you're in a position like he is, you can afford to be choosy and take your time and make the right decision.
And I think he probably, given, things didn't. I mean, granted, he never had a losing record in San Francisco, but things didn't really end well between him and the organization. So maybe there's kind of a extra incentive for him to try to avoid that the next time. So, right. Yeah, I think like what you're saying, he's going to have to find the right opportunity. And yeah, I mean, maybe he's got to wait another year. Because, I mean, there's there's head coaching changes in the NFL every year. I mean, usually it's like what 5, 7, 8 jobs that end
Right.
up opening every year. I mean,
Right.
so maybe there's something that opens up. Maybe there's still something that opens up in the next couple of days. Who knows? I mean, we've got Seattle open, which we didn't expect. So maybe there'll be something. I mean, I don't know that a lot of people expected Tennessee to be open, but maybe there'll be some other job we're not thinking of. But maybe there'll be better jobs next year. You never know.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it's a shoe in, but I think it's likely. I think like I said, I think it just comes down to Harbaugh gets the right team, the right opportunity, and I think he'll be out of there. And I mean, it's not like Harbaugh needs to prove anything. I mean, I don't know the people that like they're talking about this on Colin Cowherd's show the other day, like all the Harbaugh haters. It's a bad day for the Harbaugh haters. Like if you're not recognizing how good Jim Harbaugh is, I mean, I don't know what we're. Why are
Okay,
you on? Why are you on television? I just don't get it.
I was listening to the one of the this morning. I was listening to an episode of Colin Cowherd's podcast, and I mean, okay, Colin, are you done with for the guy who says you're not a bank and you're not in the credit business? You do pick out like 4 or 5 figures in sports and just go on and on and on and on and on and on and on, giving them credit. And look, Harbaugh's awesome. The only people who don't think that are they're either morons on the internet or they're people who are, in the media. And the only reason they're doing that is to be a reactionary or to be a troll to get attention. Okay.
Yeah, well, it's funny how things flip, right? Paul Feinbaum has been ripping Brian Kelly and Jim Harbaugh the entire time that they've been coaching. They're not good enough, blah, blah, blah. That they didn't do this, they didn't do that. Brian Kelly goes to LSU, beats Alabama. All of a sudden, Brian Kelly's not a problem anymore. Jim Harbaugh beats Alabama. All of a sudden, he thinks Michigan's the best team, and all of this stuff. So it just blows my mind how ridiculous it is. It literally, like he wins he finally beats Washington, and all of a sudden Harbaugh's a better coach today for some reason, even though he was the same guy who was winning 75% of his games in the NFL and probably 90% of his games in college. If you just don't get how good Harbaugh is, like you're not paying attention.
Yeah, just guys, you need to understand something. A lot of people in the sports media and just the media in general, they're able to amass a lot of money by just being trolls, okay? Like Clay Travis, okay? I remember when Harbaugh got the job there in Michigan and he didn't win immediately. And Clay Travis, it's the easiest take in the world. Oh, this guy's totally overrated. It's the easiest, dumbest freaking take ever. And I'm sick. And the fact that Colin's even giving them oxygen where he's basically saying all these people talking about Harbaugh's not good enough. Who are all these, like I said, who are all these people? It's morons on the internet. And then there's a few people in the media who are kind of credible who say that, but they're just doing that to get attention. Like what? We got to waste time debunking that. Yeah, Harbaugh's awesome. If you didn't know that, you're dumb. I don't know what to tell you.
And to all the SEC fans who chose not to watch the national championship game because this isn't legit, I'm sorry. I don't understand how there's this much. I mean, I do understand that college football is very tribal and regional. So I kind of get it. But it's just this is the difference. This is why I complain about NFL fans who don't watch college football, but NFL fans are generally better, right? If their team doesn't make the Super Bowl, they don't choose not to watch the Super Bowl because their team or their conference isn't in it. Right? If Philadelphia loses, they're not rooting for the NFC East to win the Super Bowl because their team lost. So it's so bizarre in college. Alabama lost, and it's like, oh, well, it's not it's just it's unbelievable, guys. This Michigan team is as good as any SEC team you guys have had in I don't know how many years. So get out of here with that. Good football is good football, period.
Yeah. That's kind of endlessly annoying to me because it's so immature. It's the same thing with the Heisman voting. I mean, it's just
Yep.
Guys, really? That's what you're going to do? It's well, they're in my area, so it's come on, really? So yeah, I just never, I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about the criticism of Harbaugh because I knew the guy was a good coach. He wins everywhere. And even the years where you're oh, he's not good enough, he was still winning 10 games. I don't see what,
He won 12 games one year at Stanford. Stanford, for crying out loud. Stanford was completely useless for how many years, and they're going to the Orange Bowl or whatever it is. So yeah, it's ridiculous, and I just don't understand college. And I'll just we'll get off this, but this is my message to college football fans, guys. You want what's good for the sport as a whole. Okay. When teams from other parts of the country win, you win too. Like, I don't understand this. We need to dominate, and the SEC needs to win everything. You know what happens when the SEC wins everything? People stop watching. The TV ratings go down. Okay. Then the Alabama Michigan game was the highest watch or most watched college football game since 2015. So we got to do, you got to do what's best for the entire sport, not just for your area or your conference. Like, it's really close minded to think that way in a sport that college football needs to do better. Like, it's the second most popular sport in the country, and it's not managed well. We need to do a better job, which means we want everybody at the table.
Yes, totally agree.
Anyway, all right, so let's move on from that. So, NFL playoffs this weekend, some previews. We're going to talk about some of the games here. This is, I got to say, Clark, I mean, as a regular season, I mean, just a few thoughts on the regular season. 17 games is too many games, Clark. We got too many teams that are limping into the playoffs and struggling at the end and falling apart. And it's just, and honestly, and I know I'm usually for more playoff teams, but I mean, there's 3 or 4 of these games that are just dog shit. So, we need to, I think that the NFL kind of had a bit of a down year. I mean, maybe it's better because maybe scoring was going up at too high of a rate. Maybe it needed to pull back a little bit. I'm not against that. I'm not against teams running the ball a little bit more. I'm not against, changing it a little bit, and maybe this, will be a little more defensive oriented. I'm not against that. I just think the NFL's really got to rethink about what they're doing, because I just think they're ruining some of these teams and some of these seasons with all the Thursday night games and the Saturday games and 17 games in the regular season. It's just, I think the season's just too long. I love football, but too much. You can have, it's possible to have too much.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're addicted to football, but it's like, guys, it's too much. I mean, you gotta, don't make it, don't make, how am I trying to say this? Sometimes things are good, but don't go for way too good. Just, really good is fine, is good enough. You don't need to be like, oh, we need more. No. Slow down. You got it good. Just pull back a little bit. But unfortunately, every time they expand the number of games, they're not going to pull it back. So
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that is kind of scary for the future of football, because they're probably just going to add more games. They're going to probably end up adding more playoff teams. So it's just, I don't know what other rule changes you can do to make the sport safer. I mean, they've really, made the sport a lot different than it used to be, 15, 20 years ago. So
Yeah, I mean, just real quick. I mean, I think the easiest switch is just, or easiest change is just to do 2 bye weeks, have 18 weeks of games, 17 regular season games. Well, I guess it'd be 19 weeks of games, do 7, everybody plays 17 games, get 2 bye weeks. I think that's a good way to kind of help it along, and you get an extra week of games, even if it's not necessarily more games. Anyway,
yeah.
all right. So moving on to the playoffs, we'll just kind of go through these one by one. Cleveland Browns versus the Houston Texans. I think this is probably the least watched game of any of them, but I do think it's kind of interesting. Cleveland with Joe Flacco as a 38-year-old quarterback, and that defense going to Houston against C.J. Stroud, one of the best rookie quarterbacks that we've ever had. I think it's a fun game. I like the Browns in this spot just because I just think their defense will travel pretty well, and I think Cleveland kind of knows what they're doing. But I don't count Houston out, especially when you've got a quarterback who can play as well as C.J. Stroud does.
Excuse me. Yeah. I got to go with Cleveland in that spot, although, it is on the road. We'll see what C.J. Stroud can do against them. I mean, obviously, Houston, they've had some big-time injuries, like, on their offense. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of got to go with Cleveland, especially if Cleveland's able to establish a running game down there, and that just makes things easier for Flacco. And then, especially if Cleveland gets ahead, they get a lead. It's just going to be, you got Myles Garrett running at you. I mean, that just seems like that's what should happen. But I mean, the fun thing about the playoffs is some of these games you just don't know until you get on the field and you see how these teams actually match up. and which way the game kind of goes. I mean, a lot of times these games they swing on a few plays. Something could happen at the beginning of the game, and then it just puts the other team behind the eight ball, and then it kind of changes the course of the game.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see a possibility of Flacco throwing interceptions. What concerns me is Houston played against Indianapolis last week and had a lot of trouble scoring against them, and the Colts defense is notoriously bad. So I think it's going to be really hard for them. But it's one of those games you get to the fourth quarter and you got it close, and C.J. Stroud has a chance. You never know. All right, moving on to the Dolphins and the Chiefs. I mean, the Dolphins defense, well, especially the defense, but the whole team is really a disaster right now. I mean, the Dolphins have lost their three best pass rushers. They got two other linebackers out. Xavier Howard's out. Like, it's a complete crap show. I mean, 4 weeks ago, Clark, I thought the Dolphins defense was ready for prime time. I thought they had a legit defense that could do some damage. But with this, I'm taking the Chiefs here, and I think the Chiefs are favored by 4. I mean, I would take the Chiefs, even though the Chiefs are struggling to score, and that's the only reason that this could be interesting because, Kansas City might have a hard time getting to 20 points, but I don't see the Dolphins doing a lot. The only way the Dolphins win this game is they've got to have the lead, especially in the first half, so they can manage the game. Because if the Dolphins offense has to try to win the game for them, we saw what happened, last week against Buffalo. I just don't think there's much chance of the Dolphins offense winning the game for them. And with their defense as banged up as it is, even though the Chiefs are struggling offensively, like this is kind of a perfect spot for them to get their act together.
Yeah. I think, again, I don't know if we want to talk about this right now. I mean, I had some stuff I wanted to talk about with Tua, but just in terms of this game, I mean, the Dolphins, there's times when injuries aren't an excuse, they're a reason. And the Dolphins defense has so many injuries right now. Just the idea, the chances of them being able to get a legitimate pass rush are pretty slim to none. I mean, I just don't see how that's going to even. Granted, Kansas City's tackles on their offensive line have been kind of struggling this year. In fact, Mahomes, you can tell, doesn't have a lot of confidence in them, so that's caused him to make some mistakes when he drops back to throw. So even that said, I mean, I don't think the Dolphin defense is going to be able to put up enough of a fight. I mean, it's kind of funny. Maybe the Chiefs offense will look kind of good this week, and it'll give everybody a false impression because the Dolphins defense is so banged up. But, then it comes down to, well, if you can't rely on the Dolphins defense, like you said, you got to rely on their offense. And I'm sorry, Tua, weak arm, not very athletically gifted. It's going to be like 0 degrees. It's probably going to be below 0, actually. So I just don't trust him to be able to make plays. We'll see. I guess Jalen Waddle and Mostert, maybe they'll play. It sounds like maybe they're going to go, but I just don't have a lot of confidence. Teams have figured out how to play the Dolphins. You pack the middle of the field, and there's really no counter move. You saw that last week. There were other throws Tua could have made, but he just can't make them. So
yeah.
Anyway, do you want to get into that whole thing I was texting you earlier about, just some stuff I'd heard about Tua given last week and then going into the playoffs where it looks like the Dolphins are going to lose, and then his whole contract situation, or do we want to?
Yeah, let's talk about it. Look, and I just want to say something about the cold weather, Clark. Everybody's like, oh, well, they can't win in cold weather, blah, blah, blah. You know when the Dolphins used to win a lot of cold weather games, Clark? When Dan Marino was their quarterback, okay? So I really don't give a shit about the cold weather. I understand that, yes, it matters, but both teams have to play in it. Yes, I understand for Tua it's a bigger deal because holding the ball is a problem for him. I get that. But at the same time, you know why the Chiefs are going to win, Clark? Because they have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, not because it's fucking cold. Okay? That's why they're going to win. So I just, I'm sorry to disappoint everybody who's like, oh, well, it's just the Dolphins can't play in cold weather. It's like, first of all those numbers are ridiculous because they don't play in cold weather very often anyway. There aren't that many cold weather games in the NFL, period. So this argument that, oh, well, they just can't play in cold. No, they're playing a team that's just better than them. That's the bottom line. And Miami, and the worst part to me, Clark, is that the Dolphins lost their 2 best pass rushers, and I don't even know that they're going to be back next season because Jalen Phillips tore his Achilles and Bradley Chubb tore his ACL. Like, their whole team is devastated by that, and that's a serious issue. But look, I think I've stated, we've stated our thoughts on Tua many times in here, and I just think it's a gigantic mistake to give him any kind of contract, even if the number per year starts with a 3. I just wouldn't do it. I would try to exhaust other options first. Now they got him signed up for next season for 23 million. So to me, I would let this ride, and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I guess you wanted to talk about the excuses that people are going to make, for
So
the overzealous Dolphin fans are going to make for this season.
yeah. So and the thing is that now is the reason that people are talking about this now is because Tua, this is his 4th year in the league, and his fifth year option starts next year, and also the other quarterbacks in his class have been paid. Joe Burrow got paid. Justin Herbert got paid. Jalen Hurts got paid. Lamar Jackson wasn't in his class, but Lamar Jackson got paid, right? Just this offseason. So now the question becomes, are the Dolphins gonna do that? Because if you do that, you're kind of saying you're committing to him long term, because that means you're going to have him for another 4 or 5 years after the 5th year option. So that means he would have been your quarterback for 8, 9, 10 years. Okay. So, I've heard some different arguments people are making in terms of defending Tua and saying that Tua's really good or an elite quarterback. And I just hear this stuff and I'm just like, guys, you're not being honest. Okay. Or you're not really looking at what's going on. And by the way, when we criticize Tua, it's not from a place of, we're just coming up with things to criticize him about. We've watched a ton of his games, not every single one, but a ton of his games over the last 4 years, 3.5 to 4 years. Okay. We've watched a ton of stuff analyzing his play. Okay. In addition to us watching it ourselves, we've watched people talk about it. We've looked at statistics. And there's lots of places you can go. I was watching a video today by Ben Zolak over at The Ringer, which I'll probably put, when I make a clip of this video, I'll probably put it up there so you can click on it and watch it. Really great video. So our criticisms of Tua are not coming from a place of ignorance. They're coming from a place of, we've analyzed this a lot. We care about this a lot because we've been Dolphins fans all our lives. And ever since Dan Marino left, we've been wanting a franchise quarterback. Okay. So that's where this is coming from. So I'm hearing these arguments from people. Well, Tua was in the MVP conversation this year. What? Okay. The MVP conversation is had in the media when they're trying to find different stuff to talk about. Okay. And by the way, the MVP is voted on by writers. Okay. Writers often have agendas. A lot of times these awards are decided based on narratives. Okay. So what do I care if he was in the MVP conversation? Look, if he ends up getting a significant number of MVP votes, okay, well, then maybe that's something. But he was in the MVP conversation? So what? Brock Purdy was in the MVP conversation. He's not winning the MVP. I mean, what are we talking about here? Okay. And then I've even heard some people say, well, Tua has elite talent. No, he does not. And any serious football person who talks about him is not going to say that he has elite talent. I don't care if people tried to sell us on that when he was coming out of college. He does not have elite talent. Okay. You know who has elite talent? Okay. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert. Hell, Joe Burrow's got some elite in him. Matthew Stafford has elite arm talent. He doesn't have elite mobility, but he's got elite arm talent. Hell, Joe Flacco's got elite arm talent. Kyler Murray has talent coming out of his ass. That guy's unbelievable. Okay? And there's probably a bunch of... Hell, Dak Prescott has more talent than Tua does. You can make an argument... Jared Goff has more talent than he does. I can make an argument for like 15 different quarterbacks before I get with Tua. So, Tua does not have elite talent. He's an undersized player who doesn't have a very strong arm. He can't make all the throws. He doesn't have elite escapability. He's also smaller, which makes it harder for him to see over his linemen to read the defense. And, another thing that he has that some elite quarterbacks have, Joe Burrow, for instance, really cool under pressure. Just, it seems like it doesn't affect, it's like a Joe Montana quality. Patrick Mahomes, same thing. Tom Brady, I know Tom Brady's the greatest of all time, but, Tua does not have that. Have you seen Tua play in these highly pressurized situations? There'll be throws that are open that he normally makes, and he'll hitch for a second before he throws it, and then the ball's behind him, or it's he throws it to the wrong spot, or he makes an inaccurate throw at the exact moment when you need him to make an accurate throw. There was a throw in the Bills game where it was, what was it? They got the pass interference call, and then I think the next play threw a ball down the field to Tyreek Hill, and he was open. But it was a throw where you really had to rip it in there, and he couldn't do it. And so Tyreek ended up getting banged up on that play, and then the next play was the interception, which is a ball that he shouldn't have thrown. I've heard some people say it was a great play by the defensive back. Fine. The ball shouldn't have been thrown. And I've heard some other arguments. Well, the Dolphins have been in need of a franchise quarterback. Sure, but you don't just sign anybody to be the franchise quarterback. And also, what does it mean to be a franchise quarterback? Do you mean if you get a second contract, you're a franchise quarterback? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, Tannehill got a second contract with the Dolphins. So I'm not really interested in that. Can you go out there and play at an elite level when we need you to? I'm not saying you got to win every single game. I'm not even saying you absolutely have to win the Super Bowl. But you at least got to give me a sense that I believe you could possibly do that. I'm sure there's some other arguments I'm missing out on. But look, we've gone on over this ad nauseum. I don't want the Dolphins to give him a contract. I think they're probably going to. But again, I have some doubts. I mean, he hasn't played well in the big games this year. If they lose the playoff game, then you got to consider his injury history. You also got to consider the fact, I think people are thinking the Dolphins really believe in this guy. I don't know. I mean, McDaniel wasn't there the first 2 years, but Chris Greer didn't really believe in him the first 2 years because they were trying to get Deshaun Watson and Tom Brady. So I don't, it's just funny to me. People are saying he's elite and they point to all these different stats. And it's just like, yeah, but how come in these big games he plays like crap? And then they say, well, they had defensive injuries. That applies in some games, like this weekend. That's going to apply in the Kansas City Chiefs game, in my opinion. Their defense is not the reason they lost the Bills game. They lost the Bills game because they couldn't score enough. There were plays that could have been made that weren't made. And guys, you got to watch that Ben Zolak video because he goes over some stuff. There's some deep balls that Tua can't complete those. There's passes he's leaving on the field that if you gave him to a quarterback with a stronger arm would be a touchdown. Okay, he's leaving touchdowns on the field.
He's also far less of a quarterback in the second halves of games, in the fourth quarter especially. So when people excuse me, when people give me numbers, it's just like, okay, yeah, but that's fine. But then you got to look at all the numbers. You can't just go, oh, well, he's leading the league in passing yards. It's like, yeah, the Dolphins played like the fourth or fifth easiest schedule in the NFL. And so they got to play a lot of weak teams with weak defenses. And so he got to rack up a bunch of yards against them. That's really not the same as, and honestly, it's not that hard. Just watch the Buffalo game. Excuse me. Watch the Buffalo game. One of those guys is elite and one of those guys is not.
Yeah, and it's just the final point I'll just make is, okay, let's say somebody just like they had watched football for several years and then they stopped when Tua got drafted and then they come back now and then they wanted to know, well, what is this guy Tua? What do you make of this guy? How do you describe this guy? Look, it's really simple, people. We've watched enough of him. We can tell you, okay? He's an undersized quarterback with limited arm strength, limited arm talent, limited athletic ability to escape from the pass rush. And he's a guy he's really good at like one thing. He's good at playing in a specific system when he's got a lot of talent around him and you can run these different timing routes and things work really well. When the scheme and the talent around him, it all coalesces together and it all comes together, it can look really good. But the moment you disrupt that timing, the moment you get some pressure on him, the moment he doesn't have all that talent around them, the moment it's you reach a critical game, and you need to understand about these big games. What ends up happening, especially in the playoffs, okay, you almost have to throw the other stuff out. It's basically, here's the ball. Go make a play, okay? Go. Sometimes the defense will give you stuff, but you also have to just go make a play. You got to read the defense or call an audible or escape, throw something on the run. You got to make a really good throw at a really critical time in the game. And there's no scheme to get you to do that. Okay? That at that point, it's you. You got to go out there and do it. And Tua is not that guy. He wasn't that guy in college. He's not that guy in the NFL. And by the way, I think it seems like he's a really great guy, and I give him a ton of credit for getting as far as he has. Because look, he won a national championship in college. He's come to the NFL. He's won games. He's definitely had success. He's proved he can win games in the NFL, but there's a level that you want to see to justify paying him, $50 million a year.
Yeah, I think he's a solid quarterback, but you're going to have a hard time winning playoff games with him. And by the way, there's a lot of quarterbacks like that. This is not just, and I don't get, and I want to make the point before we move on that we're not blaming Tua for this. Okay, this is not his fault. This is not a deficiency on his part. This is the Dolphins need to do what's best for them as an organization, and the idea that they got in their head that this guy was going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league and lead them to Super Bowls is ridiculous. And so I hope that they find a way to move on from him, because that's what needs to happen. Otherwise, we're just going to be stuck in the Ryan Tannehill, Chad Henne zone, which if you're a Dolphins fan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We're going to win between 8 and 11 games every year. We're going to make the playoffs, but we're going to lose. As soon as you get into a game against a team with a good quarterback, one of those guys, you're done. And that's the way the NFL is. It's nobody's fault. And if the Dolphins decide, all right, we're comfortable with this, I get it. I'm not happy about it, but I get it. Do you want to be the best, or are you just perfectly happy with this? And if they sign him to a contract, that tells you all you need to know. All right, so moving on, Clark. Buffalo is playing Pittsburgh. Yeah, I see no reason to even turn this game on. The fact that Mason Rudolph is in the playoffs is a disgrace to football. And get out of here with this Steelers thing. I talked about this already with you, but I mean, the idea that Mike Tomlin has had 17 seasons or whatever it is in a row where he's gone over 500, it's like, yeah, congratulations. The Dolphins go over 500 most of the time. I just think the idea that the Steelers, this is supposed to be an accomplishment for one of the premier franchises in the NFL is a joke. And I think Buffalo will pretty much handle them. I don't really have much to say about this unless Buffalo completely screws it up. They're not going to lose a home game to Pittsburgh.
Well, I mean, here's the deal. Okay, I remember this is like 2 years ago. Two or three years ago, the Bills played the Steelers the first game of the season, and this was like Roethlisberger's like last year in the league, and you could tell he was kind of done. But the Bills really struggled against the Steelers defense. Now, the problem is that TJ Watt's not going to be in there, so that sort of mitigates that. But you did just mention something that we always need to keep in mind when it comes to the Josh Allen experience, okay? And the Miami game was a perfect encapsulation of the Josh Allen experience. Like Nick Reitzman said this a few times this week. It's basically Josh Allen will do some stuff where you're like, no, don't do that. What the hell are you doing? And then later on, he'll make 3 or 4 plays like, oh my God, that's amazing. Okay, so it's just up and down, up and down. So, should the Bills beat the Steelers? Of course they should. Could they totally screw it up and be in a really tight game and fuck it up somehow? They absolutely could do that too. I have no idea. So, yeah, I'll take the Bills in this game, but you know what? The way Josh Allen is and the way the Bills are this year, especially this year, I'm not taking anything out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah. So speaking of quarterbacks that are also better than Tua, Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers, which you want to talk about his draft class, Clark. Like, if you watch Jordan Love play this year, it's like, yeah, I'd rather have him, because the guy can make a play. And that's what this whole league comes down to. I look at this game, Clark. I mean, everybody's talking about, well, Jordan Love, I think he might be able to do some damage against the Cowboys defense. I think this might be fun. Yeah, that's fine. But then the Packers also have to play defense. And their defense is pretty much terrible. Like they've been, I know Chicago couldn't do anything against them last week, but that's Chicago. I think Dallas at home is going to light up their defense pretty good. I don't think Green Bay has anybody who can stand in their way. They certainly can't cover any of the receivers, and I think Dak Prescott will be able to do what he wants to do. But this is the Cowboys, and similar. I mean, kind of similar to the Buffalo Bills. I mean, Buffalo just comes down to one player doing what he's supposed to do. Dallas, it's the entire team. Like, do we know they're going to come through when it matters? And so I think, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a close game, going into the second half. But I think in the second half, at some point, third quarter, I think Dallas pulls away because Dallas just has better players, and there's no way I believe Green Bay is going to go in and play great defense, especially in Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the thing I think everyone should keep in mind if assuming the Cowboys end up playing 2 home playoff games, like they win this week and then they go to the next round. I'll just say this for the Cowboys, especially because they're at home. If things start to go badly for the Cowboys, some buttholes are going to clench tight in those seats. I mean, let me tell you, because it's just going to be like, oh God, here we go again. And so, the Cowboys, they should beat the Packers. They totally should beat them. But I do find it kind of interesting that, and I know these are different teams, but, I feel like the Cowboys should have lit up the Detroit Lions defense, and they didn't.
Right.
So, should they light up the Packers defense? Absolutely, they should. Will they? Well, we'll see. I mean, they should. They should probably win the next their next 2 playoff games, and they should probably go to the NFC Championship game. But
this is one of those. It's one of those things. It's Green Bay comes in with house money, nothing to lose. They got a bunch of young guys who don't know they don't know any better. So it wouldn't surprise me if Green Bay hangs in the game, and if LaFleur has a good offensive game plan, and he's usually pretty good at that. Like, especially they come out in the first half and throw some stuff at the Cowboys that they haven't seen before. Dallas's defense can be had. Like, they can be taken advantage of. Their corners like to gamble. Like that, they get a lot. The Cowboys are talked about like they're a great defense, and they really aren't. So I wouldn't be surprised if Green Bay has a nice game plan. If Jordan Love makes some throws, like we'll see what happens. But I do expect at some point the Cowboys' overwhelming talent advantage to show up. All right, moving on. I think this is the best game of the weekend. The Rams against the Lions. Matt Stafford and the Rams going back to Detroit. First home game for Detroit in the playoffs in I think 30 years. So that place is going to be rocking. And Clark, as Dolphin fans, we got to pay attention to this. If the Lions win this game, the Dolphins will have the longest playoff drought in the NFL. So this is kind of a big deal. The Dolphins will be number 1 on that list at 24 years after they lose to the Chiefs. If the Lions manage to win this game, but I gotta say, I think the Lions have to be really careful. Lions defense is not great, and you're going in there with one of the best offensive coaches in the league, Sean McVay, with Matthew Stafford, 2 awesome receivers. I think the Rams could cause some serious problems, especially offensively. Detroit should be able to control the game, especially with their offense, because the Rams defense is Aaron Donald and a bunch of nobodies. So I think but this is again one of those things, Clark. Detroit, if it gets tight in there and Detroit's losing the game, like the buttholes could clench. This could be some tight sphincters in Detroit. I agree with you. I think this game could totally go either way. I would if you put a gun to my head, I'd probably pick the Lions, but I would not be surprised at all if the Rams win this game.
Well, to me it's interesting. So the Rams, I mean, could the Rams make some kind of playoff run where they like get to the NFC Championship game?
Yeah, they could.
I mean, they could win this game. I think after that they would have to play the 49ers, right?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the Rams they did play them tough earlier in the season. And they did beat them in week 18, albeit with their backups, and San Francisco had their backups in, so I don't know what you can really take from that. But is that totally out of the realm of possibility? Not necessarily. I mean, we'll see. But I guess I would. God, I don't know who I would pick in that game. I mean, because I can't really trust the Lions. I just don't. I mean, they should have beaten the Cowboys. Maybe they got screwed by the refs, but I mean, Yeah, it's just tough.
Yeah, yeah. The only thing here would be, if Green Bay were to beat the Cowboys, then the Rams would get to play the winner of the Tampa Philadelphia game. So yeah, things would have to really break for the Rams if they're going to make any more noise, because it's going to be really tough to go to. It's going to be really tough to go to San Francisco to beat them. But the Rams, have played them before. It's a divisional game, so it's not like the Rams can't be competitive. The Eagles and the Bucks. I mean, this is obviously to me the worst game of the weekend. Eagles are totally falling apart. There's talk if they lose this game, they might can Nick Sirianni. So it's Philadelphia. The Philadelphia is kind of like, they treat their teams kind of like the English Premier League. Like, if you don't win, you can go. That's how it works. So Philadelphia is rough, and the Eagles look rough. They've lost 5 out of their last 6. I find it hard to believe. I've watched Tampa play. I mean, good Lord, if the Eagles can't beat Tampa, I don't even know what to say. But I mean, Clark, it's just amazing for a team as talented as Philadelphia is, one of the best defensive lines in the league. Their offensive talent is beyond almost every other team. And for them to struggle like this is just, I just don't understand it. But I find it hard to believe the Eagles don't figure out a way to at least win this game. It may be ugly, but I think the Eagles figure out a way to do it. And I think they're only favored by 3 or 3.5. So there's not a lot of faith out there in the betting community either. But yeah,
I don't have a lot of faith in either of those teams. I saw a meme. It was funny. Speaking of the Bucks being in the playoffs, I saw some meme where it was like, yeah, your division really matters. The Bengals finished 9-8 and they're out of the playoffs. The Bucks finished 9-8 and they won their division and get a home playoff game. So go figure. I mean, I don't know how you can have any faith in either of those teams, really. I mean, I guess maybe I got more faith in the Eagles, but I mean, we've talked about it a little bit, and we were kind of making fun of Colin Cowherd because he was still on the Eagles bandwagon like a few weeks ago, and we're just like, something is wrong with this team. Like, I don't why, and it's just funny. Like, even when they had that winning streak, it was like, yeah, but they're just like screwing around with these teams. What is going on? And it just kind of, over the course of the season, it kind of unraveled.
Yeah, I mean, the last 2 wins for the Eagles, they had to hang on to beat the Giants at home, right? With Tommy DeVito playing, or it was Tyrod Taylor then.
Half the game was Tommy DeVito,
right,
and then it was Tyrod
right.
Taylor.
And then the other one was they beat Buffalo in overtime in a game that, if you watched it, they could have easily lost. So yeah, Philadelphia's got some serious issues, and they may have to. They're going to have to. I think at minimum, Philadelphia needs to fire both coordinators. They need to hire 2 new coordinators, I think, at least. If Nick Sirianni is going to stay the head coach, they've got to fix that, because neither guy worked out. They're both disasters at this point. So anyway, so yeah, I mean, look, Clark, if you gave me Ravens 49ers, either one of those teams to win the Super Bowl, and you take the field, I would take the Ravens or the 49ers. I think those are the 2 best teams. I don't feel that they're unbeatable. I definitely feel that these playoffs are, there's a lot of teams that could win. But I just think it's going to be really tough to beat the Ravens and the 49ers. And I think if the Ravens and the 49ers win their first game at home after having, some rest, if they win their first game at home, they're going to be really, really tough to beat.
Yeah, I kind of feel that, like, with the Ravens, I just think it's really incumbent just if they can start off the game well. Or if they don't start off the game well, don't put yourself in a really bad spot or anything, and just kind of play yourself into the game and then kind of get control of it. And then, if you can kind of get through that, then I think you have a ton of confidence in them. I can understand people being a little nervous about the Ravens because of past history. But yeah, they're just a really tough physical team, and I just think Lamar's got experience now, so I expect him to play well. Okay, we'll see what happens. We haven't really seen him play well in the playoffs, but I expect them to kind of come out and figure it out this time, and at the very least make it to the AFC Championship.
Yeah, all right. So let's talk about some coaching vacancies, Clark. Right now, as of this minute, there are 7 job openings in the NFL. The latest, Pete Carroll I guess he's going to be an advisor for the team. So I guess that's not technically fired. He's still going to work for the organization, but he's not going to be the coach anymore. And then yesterday, Mike Vrabel was let go. So I mean, the Seattle one is a shocker to me. Like Pete Carroll not being the head coach, I'm surprised at that. I thought Vrabel was up in the air. I didn't, I thought that you could have been 50-50 on that. But yeah, the Pete Carroll one just shocks me, Clark, because I think the Seattle roster is really good. And I know that the Geno Smith quarterback thing is probably at an end. You're probably gonna have to figure something out as far as that goes. But if I'm a coach looking at jobs, I mean, that Seattle one is awfully attractive. It's not quite as attractive as the Los Angeles Chargers because they obviously have Justin Herbert. But other than quarterback, I mean, Seattle has everything you would want.
Well, I mean, they fleeced the Broncos in the Russell Wilson trade. I mean, damn, they really, I mean, they really got the better of them. And like you said, yeah, they got a really good roster. So I mean, it's and even look, they almost made the playoffs again this year. So I can understand we can criticize Geno Smith as there's a ceiling, right, that you're not really going to get past with Geno Smith as your quarterback. But I mean, you could kind of maybe if you draft somebody this year, or maybe you just make do with Geno Smith and then you draft somebody else, like you could kind of flip that around really quick. And it's not even like they need to flip it around. Really, they're a good roster. They made the playoffs last year. They had a pretty good record this year, so that's a pretty quick. If you get the right guys in there, you can really flip that around. So that's kind of interesting. That was unexpected. We'll kind of see what happens. The Titans, okay. I mean, they got a lot of problems. I don't really think the head coach was the problem. I mean, I don't know what was going on with personnel the last couple of years. I mean, they drafted Malik Willis, and that obviously didn't work. And then they have Will Levis, and that's, we'll see, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a situation where the general manager wanted to, they hired a new general manager last year, and I think he wants control of it, and so they got rid of Vrabel, and I think that's definitely I don't think it's a great move for them. I'm not sure there's not a lot of Mike Vrabels out there. I think the guy did a hell of a job with that team, made the playoffs, won some playoff games, won the division a few times. So I think that yeah, I don't think Vrabel will be long for getting another job. I think that'll be pretty easy. But I want to talk about this, Clark. I mean, we don't know what's happening with New England yet, but I have a feeling that it's if Belichick's trying to go to another team, New England's trying to work out some kind of compensation for someone. I think that might be why it's taking a while. But regardless, we don't know what's going to happen. But assuming Belichick is out, right? And we don't know that yet, but assuming he's out, like Clark, why would anyone I know that Robert Kraft's a great owner. Who's killing for the New England job? Like, why would you want this job? They have no offensive personnel, right? You got to figure out the quarterback thing. Now, I know they have the third pick in the draft, so you can probably draft a quarterback. So from that standpoint, it's okay. But I'm not sure this is a great place to be jumping into, right now. I mean, I would much rather take the Chargers job or the Seattle job or the Washington Commanders job. Because of their particular situations over New England.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I'm just wondering, assuming Belichick is gone, who they're actually going to hire. Because we don't have any history, really, of understanding who they would hire, because Belichick's been there for 24 years. Okay, and before him, they had
Pete Carroll.
Oh, right. It was Belichick. It was Parcells and then Pete Carroll, and then but Belichick is a Parcells guy, so they probably knew him through that, so that's why they got him. So,
and he was the defensive. He was the defensive.
Yeah, are they going to be like a team that is very insular and just hires Gerard Mayo, Vrabel, I think, seems to be a good coach, but that is a huge rebuild that they got to do there. Is he the right guy for that? He definitely turned the Titans around in terms of making them a tougher football team. He improved their defense, and they definitely had an identity with him. Running with Derrick Henry, and then Tannehill doing play action stuff off of that. But I mean, the Patriots have none of that to speak of. So who wants that job, and who's qualified to go in there and really flip things around? And are they does the ownership know how to do that? Because I mean, you really look at it, they've just let Belichick run the whole show, and the only reason it worked is because they had Tom Brady. I mean, Patriots fans, like, you need to kind of buckle down here for a minute, because you guys might just be bad for a while. I mean, you've been bad since Brady left, but you might just be bad for a while. I mean,
Yeah,
sometimes this happens, and it's tough to turn around.
yeah, if I was Mike Vrabel, the Patriots would not be at the top of my list. If I'm interviewing for jobs, that would just not be it. I think, but I wanted to just go through this. I mean, we talked about this the other day, but I mean, what was the best fit for Harbaugh? I mean, I think the Chargers probably is number one, because they fired the GM and all of that. I mean, I think Washington's number two, but I'll tell you what, I don't think Seattle's a bad place. Like, if I'm Seattle, I'm definitely. I mean, now here's the problem with that, though. They have Pete Carroll as an advisor. You can't really hire Jim Harbaugh as the head coach. Not really going to work.
Yeah, no,
So,
that's not. I don't think there's any chance of that happening because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that people are kind of missing here. Like, Harbaugh's not for everybody. Like, I know everybody thinks, oh, well, he's just going to get an NFL job. It's no problem. There's only probably 2 or 3 places, I mean, if that would even take him. Like, it's not like, I know Harbaugh's won a lot of games. I know he's a great coach. No question about that. But the fit has to be correct. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So yeah, I would definitely. To me, I think it's Chargers and Washington are the two best jobs available. And yeah, I think this is crazy. Like, I certainly didn't see Seattle coming open. That was a curveball, and we get one every year in head coaching searches. So 7 jobs open, and then this news broke just before we came on. Clark, Nick Saban is retiring as Alabama's coach. And that, I mean, it's it's not ultimately surprising that, okay, he's 72, at some point he was going to do this, right? I just didn't expect it to be right now. And so I think to me, like, just looking at this, like, right away, Clark, it's like, first of all, Alabama had large gaps large gaps of years where they weren't very good. So, this idea that, oh, well, they'll just put somebody, I think there is now an open spot in the SEC, because there's no way you can tell me whoever Alabama hires is going to be anywhere near as good as Nick Saban was. And before he got there, Alabama sucked. So this is not like college. A lot of college programs are like this, Clark. When they get the right coach, they're unbelievable. Okay. Michigan, they had Schembechler, they had Lloyd Carr, they had Harbaugh. But in between that, it was Brady Hoke and, Rich Rodriguez and a lot of guys who weren't winning a lot of games. So the idea, I mean, this is tough right now to find a new coach, when we're already into January in college. Like, this is going to be a tough gig for them to, I don't know what Alabama's going to do. Now, I'm sure obviously the usual people will be called, right? I'm sure Lane Kiffin will get a phone call. I'm sure Steve Sarkisian will get a phone call, but I don't know. I don't know. We'll see what happens here. If I'm Lane Kiffin, I would definitely consider it. But that's tough to walk out on your team right now, especially in college.
Right. And I mean, also, I mean, look, if Alabama's going to be down, then Ole Miss and LSU, it's your time, baby. Like, step up. You got to start winning some games here. Say, well, Georgia can be like, oh, we got them out of the way. So
yeah, Ole Miss, LSU, Florida, Tennessee, like, guys, I think there's an open spot now. Like, go get it. Alabama still doesn't have a great quarterback.
Yeah.
Like, the Saban leaving now might cause a bunch of guys to decommit and transfer in April. So,
well, and like you said, people get the idea, oh, well, this is just a great program, and they'll just hire somebody else. No, that's not, like, that's a great point. That's not how it works at Florida. Florida's a really good program. Florida's got a great history. They're not very good. I don't know what
it's
to
Spurrier. Well, it's Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer. That's it. You take those two guys out. Florida. What is Florida? And it's the same thing. USC. USC wasn't doing anything before Pete Carroll got there. And so yeah, these programs, they need the right coach for it to be legit. Now, once you get the right coach, oh, okay, it takes off. You've seen it. Like, it's just look out. Ohio State, Michigan, USC, Miami. University of Miami is a perfect example, Clark. Like, the handful of times where they've had the right coach, they've been unbelievable. When they don't have the right coach, they are pretty bad. So yeah, I think this. I don't. This is major shoes to fill, and I would not want to follow Nick Saban. I really wouldn't. But luckily for them, Alabama has so many different coordinators and so many assistant coaches that Nick Saban's hired. They have a bunch of people they can call. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, this is going to be a shakeup in college football.
I wonder if they. I'm trying to think of the right word here, but I wonder if they end up hiring somebody who they can just because in college football, I mean, this happens all the time. Coaches will leave like right away, or they'll get fired like really quickly or something. So if they can't get a really top tier guy, maybe they get somebody, and if he's not good after a year or a year and a half or whatever, they'll just can him, and then they'll try to get in the running for whoever the hot coaching candidates are that are available at that time, a year, 2 years from now.
Yeah, so this is. I think every college football team with a great coach is like, oh no, Alabama got rid of Saban. They're all worried today that their coach is going to get a phone call. So trust me, it's this will be really, this coaching search, especially in the NFL, and this Alabama thing is going to be mighty interesting coming up. So. Clark, looking forward to the playoffs, except of course the Dolphins game. Since they've decided to put it on Peacock, I probably am not going to watch because I've been through enough trauma this year with the Dolphins. I really don't. Let the story's basically been written. Let's just end it. End it, quick and painless, and let's get out of here and move on. So anyway, but yeah, it should be a lot of fun, and we will definitely be back on at some point to review and talk about what's going on for the divisional round. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, check out the clips, and everybody have a great weekend.